Guys, get ready to have your mind blown with some mind-bending geography facts that will totally change the way you see the world. From surprising coastlines to confusing time zones, we are diving into the fascinating world of geography like never before, so buckle up and prepare to be amazed. As we explore the hidden secrets of our planet's landscape, stay tuned for an adventure you won't forget. Guys, welcome back to Epic Explorer. If your brain's feeling a bit fuzzy from all that, brace yourself for more mind-bending geography facts. Let's dive in. Alaska is known for being really big, but did you know it's also special in another way? Because of where it is on the map. Alaska is both the easternmost and westernmost state in the United States. You might have noticed that Alaska stretches farther west than Hawaii and California, but what's surprising is that it also extends to the east. There's this imaginary line called the 180th meridian that divides the world into eastern and western parts. It's exactly opposite to the prime meridian in Greenwich, England. Well, this line runs right through Alaska's Aleutian Islands. So imagine watching the sunrise on Semi-Sopoqnoi Island, which is the easternmost point of the US, and then taking a short boat ride to Amatignak Island to catch the sunset at the westernmost spot. Pretty cool, right? Now let's talk about Amatignak Island and Semi-Sopoqnoi Island. Even though they're on opposite sides of the 180th meridian, they're not a whole day apart. See, they're both part of the Hawaii-Aleutian time zone, which doesn't follow a straight line on the map. Instead, it's all zigzaggy, keeping the western islands on one time and the eastern ones on another. This is why Samoa is a full day ahead of American Samoa, even though they're super close to each other. And if you're up for an adventure, you can ring in the new year in Samoa and then zip over to American Samoa for one of the last celebrations. Now let's jet over to Russia. It's a massive country spanning 11 time zones. When it's breakfast time on one side, it's already dinner time on the other. That's because Russia stretches really far from east to west, about 5,600 miles. To put that in perspective, it's like driving from Miami all the way to Los Angeles and then turning around and driving back again. Crazy, right? Let me explain you the simpler breakdown of those complex time zone issues. Russia might be the biggest country in the world, but it doesn't have the most time zones. Surprisingly, France takes that title with 12 time zones, mostly because of its territories spread across the globe. China, which is almost as wide as the entire United States, sticks to just one time zone called Beijing time. This can lead to some odd situations, like people having dinner really late or taking tests after dark. In the western part of China, especially in Xinjiang, your ethnicity might even affect the time you follow. For instance, the Uyghurs often set their clocks 2 hours behind Beijing time, while the Han Chinese usually stick to the government's time, causing confusion. Daylight saving time can make the time zone situation even more confusing. Arizona doesn't observe daylight saving time because it's sunny enough as it is, but this causes a headache in the Navajo Nation, which spans parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. To avoid confusion, the Navajo Nation decided to change their clocks along with the rest of the states, creating a weird situation where part of Arizona is on a different time than the rest. Now I will explain the location surprises. Did you know that if you've been to Reno, Nevada, you have actually traveled farther west than Los Angeles? Even though Reno is 300 miles away from the coast, it's still 86 miles to the west of Los Angeles. It's a bit mind-boggling, and if you've visited Maine, you might think you've been way up north, but compared to parts of Europe, it's not as high as you might imagine. Places like London, Paris, Brussels, and Amsterdam are actually further north than Maine. It's a bit surprising, isn't it? But here's another twist. Maine is also farther east than you might have guessed. The tip of West Quoddy Head, if we don't count Alaska, is the easternmost point of the US mainland. It reaches out into the Atlantic Ocean more than any other state below it. In fact, it's just about 3,154 miles away from El Bedouza, Morocco, making Maine the closest state to mainland Africa. For comparison, Florida is around 4,000 miles away. Interesting, isn't it? Here's a simpler way to understand Texas and Canada's size and population. Texas is the second largest state in the US. Right after Alaska, it covers about 260,000 square miles of land. In 2022, it had a population of around 30 million people, but that's not even close to its maximum capacity. Some people say that if Texas had as many people per square mile as New York City, it could hold nearly 8 billion people, but that's just a fun fact. In reality, fitting that many people would mean taking over more than half of Arkansas. To put it into perspective, if the whole world had the same population density as Houston, it would cover about 2/3 of the land area of the United States. Now, let's talk about Canada. It's bigger than the US, but its population is much smaller. There are only about 40 million people living there, compared to the 332 million in the US. Canada's population is just a bit higher than the 37.2 million residents in Tokyo's greater metro area. If you think that's not many people for such a huge country, consider this. About 60% of Canada's population lives below the latitude of Seattle, even Toronto and Montreal. Canada's biggest cities are south of Washington. That means vast areas of Canada are pretty much empty, especially up north where winters can be harsh. Did you know that Canada has the longest coastline in the world? It might seem like countries like Russia or Australia would have longer coastlines, but Canada's Great White North surprises. With a whopping 151,019 miles of shoreline, that's according to Canada's National Statistical Office. However, getting an exact measurement is tricky because of something called the coastline paradox. Basically, when you measure coastlines using big units, you miss out on all the little curves and bends. Using smaller units might give you more accuracy, but it quickly becomes too difficult. Shorelines are so detailed that if you zoom in enough, it seems like they stretch forever. So instead of trying to measure every tiny detail, map makers stick to broader measurements to keep things simple. Let's head over to Australia. Even though some countries are small, they can have really long coastlines. For example, Norway, with its many fjords and islands, has a coastline of about 64,000 miles, even longer than Russia, despite being smaller in size. But when you think of beach vacations, Norway might not be the first place that comes to mind. That's where Australia shines. If you were to tour Australia's beaches, you'd have over 10,000 mainland beaches to choose from. In fact, a study from 2006 found that there are 10,685 of them. If you visited one beach every day, it would take you more than 29 years to see them all. And here's something fascinating. Australia is also pretty wide, from its east coast to its west coast. It stretches about 2,500 miles. That's wider than the diameter of the moon. Of course, Australia doesn't beat the moon in terms of overall size, but when it comes to width, it's definitely a winner. My simple take on this: people often mix up New Zealand and Australia, which can be irritating for the locals. However, despite sharing some similarities, these two countries have distinct cultures and are quite far apart geographically. In fact, there's about 1,000 miles of ocean between them, which is enough space to fit another whole Australia. The maps we often see in classrooms, called the Mercator projection, have been criticized for giving Europe too much importance. This is why many people mistakenly believe Greenland is as big as Africa, when Africa is actually about 14 times larger. These maps also tend to place Europe in the center of the world, cutting off most of Antarctica and pushing the equator down. To be more accurate, maps should center on Africa, since it's the only continent that crosses both the equator and the prime meridian. That's all for the mind-bending geography facts today. Let us know in the comments which one surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Please like, share, and subscribe for more epic stuff. See you in next video.